but I maintain I have the right to decide what I look like. It could be very important on the Earth. People on Earth attach a very great deal of importance to what's happening.
The Second Doctor's regeneration. A pivotal point in Doctor Who history is it cemented the ability for the Doctor to change after it being thought to be a one-off originally. Coming at the end of an amazing 10-part epic in the War Games, the Doctor is sentenced to exile to Earth by the Time Lords. As part of this exile, it is decided that his face will change again. What you're seeing on screen is the Second Doctor's regeneration. Or so we thought. If that's the case, why does he seem to be working on behalf of the Time Lords and the two Doctors?
Look at this!
What? Hey, I've not seen that before.
It's not been here before. It's a teleport control. You'd think I never flown a TARDIS solo!
Or seem to remember the events of the War Games in the Five Doctors.
You're not real. When you were returned to your own people, the Time Lords erased your memory of the period you spent with me. So how do you know who we are?
And why in the Three Doctors does he seem unbothered by helping the Time Lords?
Perhaps I could explain.
Perhaps you could.
Well, our fellow Time Lords out there are just as much under siege as we are.
What?
And they couldn't send anyone to help you. But they did summon up enough temporal energy to lift me out of my bit of our time stream and pop me down here, into my own future, so to speak.
Well, perhaps there is a reason for this. As the Second Doctor continued to appear in the show after the event of Colour, and after his Doctor had long passed, fans wanted to piece together why he looked considerably different by the time of the two Doctors. Not only is the Doctor's appearance different, as is Jamie's, but they seem to be on a mission for the Time Lords. Now, Jamie would have no knowledge of the Time Lords until the War Games when he leaves and has his memory wiped. So from what time period are they from? This question has perplexed fans ever since VHS releases of the War Games and Spearhead from Space had come out, as a lot of people didn't feel like the end and the beginning of that are very consistent. And I'd have to agree. The ending of the War Games was left very open-ending, simply because they hadn't cast an actor yet to be the next Doctor. But fans saw an opening in canon, and they ran away with it. The first time that this was brought up on a global or national scale, I guess, was in the Discontinuity Guide in 1995, where a very widely theorised point was put out there that there is a set of adventures that the Second Doctor went on after his exile and before his regeneration. So these adventures had taken place between the War Games and Spearhead from Space, and has collectively, as a theory, become known as Season 6B. Now this theory became so credible that it was actually posted about on the classic series Doctor Who website, as you can see here. It does make you wonder, does the BBC now consider this canon? Because if so, that's really cool. Now I'll very quickly mention it here, there is something else in continuity called the Devious fan film, where we get to see the mid-Second Doctor who does missions for the Time Lords regenerate into the Third Doctor, but this is not confirmed canon. This is just a theory, but do you know who bought into that theory? Terrance Dicks. Now not only did he write the War Games, but he also was the showrunner when the Three Doctors was made, and he also wrote the Five Doctors, so he's partially responsible for this big mess of continuity. And fair play to the man, he did try to fix it by taking this theory on board, with his 1995 release of the book Players, where the Second Doctor's missions whilst on trial are not only confirmed, but mentioned in this story. Now this little tidbit seemed to confirm the theory that fans had, but it was still questionable. Now the book that was released in 2005 completely confirmed it. We had to wait until after the 10th Doctor was cast to finally get this confirmed. In World Game, this book takes place directly after the events of the War Games, and we see the Doctor agreeing to and meeting his new contractors, let's say. So within the realms of continuity, because BBC books are considered to be canon, and the writer who wrote it, you can consider this canon now. It only took him 40 years nearly to explain it properly. What if I told you that this theory was confirmed all the way back in 1969? TV Comic was a weekly publication that showed off comic strips from various different TV shows. This so happened to include Doctor Who. Now these comics would run throughout the 60s and the 70s. And as the story goes, when the Second Doctor announced he was leaving the show, the makers of the comic wanted to keep doing the comic series, but they had no idea who the next Doctor was going to be. So for the rest of 1969, they commissioned a series of stories that would explain the Doctor's exile after the War Games. During these stories, the Doctor would be very well looked after, as he was allowed to stay in a nice hotel and became somewhat of a celebrity on the Earth. I will read to you the synopsis of each of these stories, as there are only a few. And the first one is called Action in Exile, where the Doctor is enjoying his private suite at the Carlton Grunge Hotel, I think that's what it's called, while the boys next door are making quite the ruckus. He overhears them planning to run away from their guardian, Mr. Fritz Walker, using his own private plane. Can he stop them in time? And is Mr. Fritz Walker all that he seems? The next story is called The Mark of Terror, and when a scientist, Dr. Rowan Cartwright, falls into a coma upon seeing the mark of Belham, the Doctor attempts to bring him back to consciousness. The next story is called The Brotherhood, and the Doctor is kidnapped by the mysterious Brotherhood, who find him and take him. He finds himself tangled in a plan to unearth Aztec treasure. The next story is called UFO, and there's a bit more of a summary to this one. A 10-year-old boy picks up a distress call from what turns out to be an alien species called Crotons. He thereafter joins the Doctor on a journey to the Arizona desert to rendezvous with the aliens, whose navigational circuits the Doctor intends to fix. This said, when the job is done, their leader refuses to let him and the boy go, and they find themselves on a collision course for the moon. Now, the final story is called The Night Walkers, and this is one of the more interesting ones. Now the Doctor is somewhat of a celebrity and is invited on a game show. Once on this game show, one of the callers decides to tell him of a problem. This problem is that he is a farmer, and his scarecrow seems to be coming to life. Upon hearing this, the Doctor cannot resist, so he decides to check up on this himself. Once there, he realises that there are some animated scarecrows that are actually the work of the Time Lords, to bring him in and try and start the second stage of his exile, regeneration. So there you have it. As early as 1969, it has been a confirmed, somewhat fact that the Doctor has been working with the Time Lords even during his second incarnation. Now, whilst I can't say with complete certainty that these comics are canon, I can say that they were meant to tie in with the TV show, and they were published around the same time, so I'm going to accept them. And so began the Doctor's second stage of his exile.